Hello and welcome to Noble Mind.
Noble Mind is a podcast exploring mindfulness, meditation, and psychology.
Hello, Noble listeners. In this episode, we got to talk to Willa Blythe Baker about her new book, The Wakeful Body. We explored how meditators often experience an unnecessary divide between mind and body, and how to begin connecting to the inherent wisdom in our bodies. Listen through to the end where Willa guides us in a brief grounding meditation practice. Willa Blythe Baker is an author, translator, and authorized lama in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. She's the founder of Natural Dharma Fellowship and its retreat center, Wonderwell Mountain Refuge in Springfield, New Hampshire. Willa has been on the faculty at Harvard Divinity School, the Mind and Life Institute, Kripalu Center, Omega Institute, SanghaLive, and One Earth Sangha. Her books include her newest, The Wakeful Body, Somatic Mindfulness as a Path to Freedom, as well as Everyday Dharma and The Arts of Contemplative Care. We would love to keep in touch with our listeners, so head on over to Noble Mind Podcast, where you can join our email list, send us a message and tell us how we're doing, and as always, get this episode's show notes. Happy listening. Welcome. Here we are with Willa Blythe Baker. Thanks so much for joining us today on Noble Mind.
So happy to be here, Kate and Alex. So nice to be here with you.
We are really looking forward to talking with you and hearing a little bit about your new book, The Wakeful Body. But maybe just start us off by saying hello to our listeners and telling them a little bit about who you are and what you're about.
Hi, Noble Mind listeners. My name is Willa Blythe Baker, and I am a teacher and author and translator in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. I really love the practice of meditating through and with the body, and recently have been doing a lot of that and sharing it with others.
Wonderful. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, I think what inspired me to write this book was just discovering through my own practice of meditation that when I listen deeply to the body, it grounds and centers my mind, which is much more a flighty entity than the body. And so just through meditation practice and through paying attention to my body, beginning to notice the ways in which the body is expressing some of the qualities of stability and ease that we seek through a practice of meditation.
And you talk about how the mind is sort of understood in common Western modes of thinking and being, and then maybe some of the troubles with that. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, when I say something like the mind, first I just have to say that mind and body really can't be separated out as two separate entities. But for the purposes of practicing, there does seem to be a mind that is thinking and a body that is self-regulating and having various feelings. There is a kind of an experiential divide between mind and body. So in the book, I do talk a little bit about that, how the experiential divide actually is responsible in some ways for our dis-ease in being alive. And in fact, the masters of the past in the Buddhist tradition, I'm sure in other traditions as well, have pointed to this divide between mind and body as being exactly what is the source of our suffering. And so the Zen master Dogen, one of the great Zen practitioners and writers from Japan, talked about it as the oneness of the body-mind. He talked about enlightenment itself as being the oneness of the body-mind. Also, Yangompa, a Tibetan yogi, scholar, somatic theorist, talks about the integration or the unity of body and mind as being the end of the path. That is how that's where the path is taking us, the path of meditation. So ultimately we could say body and mind are not separate, and maybe our task as meditators is to fully integrate, to fully bring together body, breath, and mind into one integrated experience. And that wholeness, the experience of that wholeness, is a kind of awakening. But on the other hand, for the purposes of just really working with the body-mind, it helps it to think about body and mind. Our conceptual mind is doing a lot of thinking, a lot of running into the past, ruminating on the past, anticipating the future, having angst about various things in the present moment, looking for threat. And our body, on the other hand, if you just turn attention, say, to your knees or your feet, the body is not thinking. The body is non-conceptual. And in that way, the body is a kind of a teacher for the mind.
I think you were also saying in the book, which I loved, was it helped sort of parse something out for me, was that the mind has a lot of thoughts about the body, like you were talking about the conceptual body, right? Or the body image, and just to kind of parse that out of the sort of experience of the body, like actually just feeling and sensing, versus like all of the blah, blah, blah about the body that we carry around, our health, our fitness, our weight, whatever. Even just that distinction alone felt like, oh, that sort of reveals something there too.
Yeah, that part of the book, I was talking about there being two bodies, not just one body, but, we think we just have a body. But when we really examine it, we actually have two bodies. The first is our idea of our body, all the ideas, the body, the whole collection of ideas that we have about the body. Like, I'm ugly, I'm beautiful, I don't like the way this looks about my body, and I like the way this is about my body. I'm thin, I'm not thin, I'm tall, I'm short. We have these ideas, this sort of body identity that psychologists call body image. And that is one kind of body. And often I think we think that's the only body we have, that our ideas about the body, we believe them to be true. When in fact, when you really look at it, these are just concepts. They're just ideas that we have. Now there's a second body. And the Buddha, I think, referred to this in the Satipatthana Sutta. He referred to a body in the body, kaya kaye, that we have a body in the body. And who knows exactly what he meant, because we don't know. We can't go back and ask him. But one thing he might have meant is this idea body that we have, this conceptual body. And the second body that is a more hidden body is the body of experience, which means what we're experiencing in the present moment, the feeling of our breath going through the nostrils and down into our lungs, the feeling of the air on our skin, the feeling of our feet on the ground. Those experiences are part of an present moment body that is alive and wakeful and just feeling, just breathing, just being. There's no ideas there. There's just feeling. And so I make a distinction in the book between the conceptual body and the feeling body, or the body of experience. And when we start to parse out those two differences, we notice that we have a different body that we can access that has a lot to offer in terms of drawing us into states of greater joy and ease.
In the book, as you described, our conventional way of thinking about the mind and the body is confused, going back to Descartes and perhaps earlier to dualism within Christianity. That is also reflected in our understanding of ourselves, what confuses us, but also in the way people approach meditation. And you also talk about how there's more than one way of seeing this in Buddhism, in Buddhist culture as well, in the tradition, which can be confusing. And I really loved your explanation of meditation from this perspective.
Yeah. So I don't know about you guys, Kate and Alex, but when I first met the teachings on mindfulness and teachings from the Buddhist tradition, there was just so much in the content of the instructions about mind. Bring your mind back. When it strays, when it wanders away, bring it back and refocus it on this thing or that thing, this quote unquote mind. And then also discussion of the essence of that mind. So both the thinking mind, the distracted mind, but also the idea of an essence of that mind. And I think because of our Western upbringing and the Cartesian dualism that is a part of our education system, that is deeply embedded in our philosophical history and in our religious history, I think that when we hear a word like that, like mind, bring the mind back, or essence of mind, we assume that what we're talking about is something that is completely separate from and somehow transcendent above the body. And that the body is this mass of flesh and blood that is controlled by the mind. But actually, science is revealing that not to be true, that our mind is just as controlled by what's happening, or our brain is just as influenced by what's happening below the neck as what's happening below the neck is influenced by the brain. And in fact, there is no difference anymore, really, between brain and body, that this thing that we call brain, according to neuroscientists today, extends all over the body. It is the nervous system. The brain can't be separated apart from the nervous system. So in the same way, we can't separate mind from the body. While we're in a body, we are embodied. And so actually, we receive the teachings of Buddhism and the teachings of mindfulness from this perspective that is predisposed to think of the mind as just the brain, that the mind is not something that is permeating our whole experience, which is actually what Asians mean when they talk about mind. They mean something permeating our whole experience. And so, so we have a lot to kind of, the more I think we can be aware of that predisposition that we have towards a body-mind dualism, the more we can really begin to understand the deep teachings on mindfulness and on the practice of meditation, and even the teachings on compassion and on pro-social behaviors, that these are not just practices of changing the way that we think, that practices of compassion and practices of pro-social behavior certainly within Buddhism, are very much about embodied presence and very much about the feelings that we feel when our heart is open and when we're connected. And that is all coming through the body.
You were alluding to earlier about the body as a sort of a source of wisdom, and I think that we often think about, where do we get wisdom or insight or knowledge from? Well, we read a book or we go to a teacher, they sort of bestow that unto us. But it's, you're arguing something very different, which is that we can get that sort of wisdom and insight from our body. Maybe you could say a little more about that.
Yes, sure. Yeah, I think one of the deepest teachers of Dharma, of the meditation practice, or of practices of wisdom, is the body itself. And so let's think about, when we think about body, from a Western perspective, we think about the body as this flesh and blood entity that includes these functional systems. But from an Eastern perspective, the body is a mandala, and mandala means universe. The body is this psychophysical universe that is vast and complex and also mysterious. The body, from an Eastern perspective, has its own intelligence and order in the same way that the physical universe does. So for thousands of years, Buddhists have been practicing with the body as a teacher, the body as an expression of states of peace and balance, the very states that we think of as enlightened. And in some corners of the tradition, like in yogic Buddhism or Himalayan Buddhism, there's even something called a wisdom body that is always present. to us. So by turning our attention to the body, we discover that we have a teacher right under our noses. And in fact, it is our nose and all the other parts of our body. The teacher is not only under our noses, it is. And what does the body teach us? So I could land on 4 things here that I could share that might really help any one of us at any moment access the body as the teacher. And the first of those things is that the body is present. What do I mean by that? The body lives in the present moment. So when you get into a close relationship with your body, which is to say that you start noticing the body from moment to moment, it is here now and it is not living in any other time. Mm-hmm. The conceptual mind is bouncing all around in time. Mm-hmm. It's back in the past, it's in the future. And this past and this future, these are fictions. When you really examine it, where is the past? Where is the future? It doesn't truly exist. The body is expressing that already, that it is expressing the truth of now, the radical now. We are breathing. We are sensing the air on our skin. We are seeing. We are smelling. And these feelings are happening in the present moment through the medium of the body. So this here and now awareness is expressing itself right now through the body. Now, this is important because when our conceptual mind is running into the past and into the future, we are largely enmeshed in suffering. I mean, sometimes we are maybe reliving a happy fantasy, but much of our past ruminations are about self-doubt, guilt, concerns about what we did or how we did it, fears. And our future thinking is about worry, anticipation, protecting ourselves. You know, we're not very engaged with what is right here now, and we may very well miss our life. So the body helps us not miss our life.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about this sort of frontal lobe version of the past and the future that you're describing. But I was also just thinking about how the here and now body is carrying the actual resonance of the past or whatever in it. There is a certain way in which the past is alive in our body in the moment, but that's different than the story that we tell ourselves about our past in our brain.
Right. No, that's a great point, Kate. And I also do discuss that a bit in the book, that we carry our entire history in the body. And from a perspective of the Eastern traditions or yogic traditions, we would call it the subtle body, that our subtle body registers our history. And that when the conditions are ripe and they arise, it can re-trigger that past to come alive in the present. And this is, of course, a phenomena recognized by trauma therapists and by psychotherapists in general, that our body our nervous system, if you will, is holding these histories, but the story is very much in the mind. So yes, that is the case. That's right.
So I think there was a second one.
Thank you. Yes. The second quality that makes the body a teacher is that the body is honest. And what do I mean by saying the body is honest? Well, let's take an example. Let's contrast it to the mind, the thinking mind, for a moment. The thinking mind, the conceptual mind. The conceptual mind lies to us. And how does it lie to us? It tells us stories about how we feel or how things are in the world. And yet those stories are often proven later, maybe within a day, maybe within a month or a year, to be not what we thought. Our stories aren't necessarily true. You know, I love that bumper sticker, "Don't believe everything you think." It's one of the best little phrases of what we're really doing in meditation, is learning to see the ephemeral nature of what we're thinking. It seems true, but actually, ultimately, it's pretty shaky. The body, however, is often very tuned in to those things, how we feel or how things are in the world. The body is like a kind of a radar that picks things up even before the conceptual mind picks it up. And what I mean by that is that our senses and our less conceptual parts of the brain also pick up clues and signals before the conceptual mind has made up a story about them. And so, for example, take an emotion like anger. The other day, I found myself in a Zoom waiting room on a call to the city of Boston, and I was put on hold for hours, and I didn't want to admit to myself how irritated I was. But when I turned my attention to the body, I could feel it. I suddenly noticed that I was hunched over, I was tense, I felt depleted. Mm-hmm. And the body was explaining to me, even before my mind really admitted it to myself, how frustrated I was. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by the honesty of the body. The body, if we start listening to the body will often tell us how we really feel, not how we think we should feel or what we think other people would like us to be feeling, but what are we actually feeling? And then we can attend to it gracefully and with kindness. If we don't know what we're feeling, we act out of that without even bringing it to full consciousness. So it's important to pay attention to the body's truths in that way, to its honesty.
Yeah, I think there's also, I don't know if you all share this experience, but sometimes, as you're saying, either you haven't admitted the emotion to yourself, but your body's very clearly telling you, right? Or it's sort of sometimes that I don't want to feel this. So then it's like I'm trying to tell my body to stop whatever it's feeling or something, or like do something different. I don't know.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable when we start noticing sometimes that body's honesty. And so then we can't just stop there with the discomfort. And we do need practices, therefore, for metabolizing the awareness of these emotions. Once we are aware of what we're feeling, how to metabolize the emotion. You know, meditation is not so much about getting rid of anything. What we feel, it's not about getting rid of or getting around our humanness, but it's about learning to take that humanness and to metabolize it into something constructive and to make space for it and love it into freedom. So the third way that our body is the teacher is that the body is grounded. This is not an abstraction. You can feel the force of gravity right now, at this very moment, at the base of your body. And if you bring your attention down to that lower part of your body, say where your feet are coming into contact with the earth, or where your seat is coming into contact with the chair, you will notice the weight of your body as a pressure. And this constant feeling is both vibrant and solid. It's a kind of vivid groundedness. And that is a daily reminder. If we come down and connect to that groundedness, a daily reminder to the entire being, our entire being, that we are held and supported by the earth, and that we are stable at this moment on this earth. And that can help ground the flighty, anxious mind, which is bouncing around. When we come down to that place, it immediately grounds us and centers us. And that's a lesson. That's a teaching that's being offered from your body right now. And in fact, every moment, because we can't really get away from being these grounded beings on this earth. And in the book, I talk about this in the section on the earth body, the first of the different 4 layers of embodiment. Earth, subtle, awareness, and integration, these 4 layers of embodiment. But the body is grounded. So that's a teaching we can get at any moment, and maybe one of the most profound teachings that the body offers, that you are grounded and stable in the here and now.
For some reason, I'm just having this association of this documentary they were showing astronauts coming back to Earth and getting used to gravity again. And it's a thing, like it's a re-entry process to get used to, like when you haven't felt the weight of gravity for a long time and then you come back, you feel sort of burdened by it in some way, or like it sort of is hard to readjust.
Cool. That's really neat. Is this the one, the overview effect?
You might be describing that experience that astronauts get. That's more of a metaphysical view.
Right,
yes.
Right. The metaphysical view, and it's called the overview or the overview effect. It's a video on Vimeo. You can find it. It's so profoundly connected in some ways to sort of the notion that awareness is infinite. And these astronauts had this kind of experience looking down from space at the Earth at how, well, first of all, how fragile the Earth is and how vulnerable it is, and had that really visceral sense of, if we don't take care of this, we have no other home. And the home in space that we have is so not friendly to human life. And when you come back here, you realize, wow, this little environment that's friendly to us is so fragile and precious, and we must protect it. That was what the astronauts had come to see, called the overview effect, that sense of being, really seeing the whole picture from space. Yeah. So the fourth point, the fourth way the body is teaching us is that the body is non-conceptual. There are places in our organism that are not thinking. And when we put our attention to those places, we notice that they are just awake. They're just feeling. They're just vibrant. And when we sense those places of our experience, we also notice that those places aren't agitated and they aren't depressed. So whatever feeling is going on sort of in our emotional self, we can access the body as this way to contact parts of ourself that aren't going through any of that kind of suffering, that those parts of the body are actually lively, awake, sensing. There's a kind of a beauty and a joy in those parts of our body. And when we turn our attention there, we notice, oh, I could dwell there. I could dwell in my right palm, or I could dwell in my the soles of my feet. I could dwell in my heart center and feel this vibrant, warm quality in my heart center, which isn't feeling some of the things that are going on in my rumination or in my mood. So the non-conceptuality of the body has a lot to teach the mind. And if we pay attention to this thing we call body, that it is grounded, that it is honest, that it is in the present moment, and it is also non-conceptual, we can learn to spend a lot more time there and really not miss our life and be in a part of our experience that is awake already.
So you explain 3 bodies in the book: the earth, subtle, and truth bodies. We've started to talk a little bit about that. I wonder if you can say more.
Yeah, so the earth body is the physical body, this physical layer. When I say bodies, I'm really not talking about in the book that we have 4 separate bodies, as if we had 4 emanations or 4 avatars, not like that. But like with 4 layers of embodiment. And this is a schema that comes out of the Buddhist tradition as a way of talking about body, or kaya is the Sanskrit for that, kaya, body. And those 4 layers, the first, the earth body, what I'm calling the earth body in the book, is the physical flesh and blood body. In Buddhist traditions, that is called the nirmanakaya, or the metamorphic body. So the body that is we can see and touch with our eye. We can see it with our eyes. We can touch it. We can feel it. It is material. It is solid. So that's the first layer of embodiment. I call it the earth body because in some ways this is a body that has been born from this earth. We are made of these atoms and molecules that are actually ancient, right? We're made of stardust. But we are like risen out of this earth, and someday this body will dissolve back into the earth, the water, the wind, fire, perhaps dissolve into fire. So that's the earth body. The second layer of embodiment from within this schema is the subtle body, or what I think I call sometimes in the book the energy body. The subtle body can't be touched with our fingers, with our hands, can't be squeezed. For example, you can't give a hug to that layer of embodiment per se, although if you hug someone's physical body, that layer of embodiment will feel it. The subtle body is the sense of energy or electricity, the vibrant quality of the body. So our body isn't just flesh and blood, it's also vibrating with energy. And of course, from the medical point of view, we'd say that there's a nervous system here. There are electrical impulses that are rushing through the body at all times that can't be seen with the naked eye, but can be measured, right, with instruments. So from a mystical perspective or from an esoteric Buddhist perspective, that part of our experience, embodied experience, is called the subtle body. And I think the subtle body is really a first-person experience of the nervous system, a first-person experience of being a vibrating source of energy. When if you were to look down at the smallest particles of a human body, the electrons and the protons and the neutrons and in the body, you would see just energy and space, right? That's all there is from a physics point of view. So that's what we're experiencing when we're experiencing the subtle body, that we are just this energy body. And that can become this really profound place of resting and practicing as you get more familiar with your body as this field of energy. You can start to tap into a more subtle experience of your body and notice, for example, when you have a thought, that the thought registers throughout that energy body. Or if you have a feeling, the feeling registers, or like an emotion, the emotion registers throughout your body as this rush of energy or this change in energy. And as you become more facile with noticing that and with seeing that that is present, you can begin to meet it and befriend it and make space for that, to in the same way that we might say you make space for storms, right? That the sky is a space for storms. As you notice, then you can begin to have a little bit more patience when those things are rushing through your body. Yeah.
And this subtle body realm you're describing, is that what some traditions would call like chi or prana, or countless other traditions, I'm sure, have their own way of describing that. But is that the sort of subtle body realm would be connected to that?
Yes, I think that chi and the idea of prana, certainly the idea of prana and chi, are the same idea, just different histories, different languages, different systems. But yes, the same idea. And in the Buddhist tradition, sometimes this subtle body is also called the prana body. It's also called the prana body because it is a host for prana, which is this subtle energy. And there's one more thing about the subtle body that I find useful. Perhaps I offer it for what it's worth, that in the yogic traditions of Buddhism, one of the paths towards enlightenment is described as a path of unifying prana and mind. That when prana and mind are in complete unity, which means energy and mind come together, that is an awakening experience. In the Tibetan, it's lungsem yerme, which means prana, mind inseparable. So lungsem yerme is both the path and it's also the fruition. That the path is to bring the mind and prana together, and the fruition is when prana and mind are integrated. And I just offer that for whatever it might be worth for your listeners to reflect on. What does it mean to bring energy and attention into a unified state? And I do talk about how to do that in the book. How can we, what are some exercises for doing that? Like bringing attention to the breath is an exercise for doing that. Bringing attention to the all over feeling of aliveness from your head to your toes is a way of doing that.
There's some great practices in the book, and also a reference to some guided audio to go along with it as well, which is very helpful. So far you've covered what you call the earth body, the subtle body, and I think probably the ones that are a little more familiar for many folks. How about the next body?
Yeah, the third body. The third body is the sky body or the awareness body. I call it the sky body because the sky invokes the nature of this third layer of embodiment. The third layer of embodiment is awareness. And when we hear a word like awareness, we might think that we're talking about the mind that is aware. Say my mind is aware of the sound of your voices when you speak, or my mind is aware of, say, a tree outside the window. That's a dualistic awareness. But in this third layer of embodiment is pointing to awareness that is non-dual, an awareness that is prior to separating things into self and other. So there's a moment in perception before we have labeled something, before we've decided what it is, and before we've decided that it is somehow out there and I am in here. And that moment is that first moment is when we can most easily contact this awareness that is not separating things out. And that awareness is, when we hear a word like awareness, we may think of something transcendent, non-dual awareness, something that transcends the ordinary. Or we might think it's just something up in the brain. But actually, awareness is embodied. And so that third layer, to talk about awareness, even that the tradition of Buddhism talks about awareness as a body. So in Sanskrit, it's Dharmakaya, which means the body of truth. That awareness is a body is so indicative of how we can experience our awareness as something that permeates our entire embodied experience, something that is embodied and worlded. So that third layer is inviting us to begin to think about awareness as something that is embodied and that we can experience throughout the field of our embodied experience, permeating everything. That's the third layer.
So is that staying with, as it were, the leading edge of awareness? I think you're describing it as before even there's awareness of separateness, of out there. It's sort of a purer, more primordial.
A more primordial awareness. And that first moment is always happening. I'm talking about it as first, but actually, because you could say first moment, second moment, third moment, but when second moment is happening, first moment is also happening. Mm-hmm. So in other words, I talk about it as the first moment because sometimes it helps us to walk back from our dualistic experience to the source. And the source is this non-dual moment of just wonder and wakefulness and awe before we've closed down and decided how we feel about something, that it's out there, and before we've othered it and decided it's a threat or it's a friend or it's a neutral to us, before we've even gone there. But that before moment is happening every moment. And the afters are also happening.
So is that before the moment we realize, I'm angry?
Yeah.
Well, what comes to my mind when I think about a clear experience before a thought comes in is like a moment of pain, or, you stub your toe or whatever. And because it's so vivid, but it's so non-conceptual, it's just like, then the next, as you're saying, the second thought or, the next moment is like, that really hurt. Oh my gosh, why is that table there? I should move it, whatever. But I don't know, that comes to mind as like very easy to access, that there's not a conceptualization happening yet.
That's so helpful. Yeah. Yeah, Kate, that's helpful. Because there's these surprises that happen to us before we start thinking about like that. Yeah, that's a great example of how we can experience something really strong and not have a thought about it yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though it happens so quick that the thought comes next. Right. Yeah. And then like the thoughts crank up into a story or then into a feeling.
Right.
So I'm thinking about time and I'm thinking about the structure of our conversation here. We're sort of loosely following the kind of 3 big parts of your book, but I know you also sort of mentioned kind of 4 in terms of bodies. So I want to make sure we get to that last one.
Yeah. Now, there is a 4th body that I decided to hold off in the book until mentioning it at the very end of the book, because really just to get in touch with the first 3 layers will eventually easily lead to being in touch with the 4th.
And the first 3 are like, I mean, that'll take a lifetime on its own, I feel like.
Right.
Those first 3.
That's right. It's an endless journey, the body journey. It's an endless pilgrimage into these layers of embodiment. Yeah, the 4th body is not an actual separate layer of embodiment. In fact, it is the inseparability of the other 3 of all those 3 layers, that the physical, the energetic, and the awareness body coexist. And I think that flummoxes the conceptual mind. Like, how can matter and energy and something that is conscious coexist? If we try to think about it with a conceptual mind, it kind of blows your mind. But when you really see that all those things are operative, and you start to notice that actually you're teasing them out for the purposes of practice and for development and evolution, it's helpful to tease them out. But ultimately they are one. That realization of oneness there's a great freedom in that. That's the oneness of the body mind that Dogen spoke of. And it's the integration of body and mind, or body, breath, and mind, that Young Bompa, that somatic yogi, spoke of. And we can experience that. There is a kind of a freedom when we are in flow, this state where body, mind, and breath and energy seems to be this single whole experience. And we are absorbed in the whole body. We're absorbed in a kind of embodied attention that is joyful and present, and that isn't parsing things out. There's something really liberating about those moments. So I get those moments for myself when I go out on a hike in the woods in New Hampshire near my house in the fall, this season right now, when the trees are, probably by the time this podcast airs, it will be in a different season. But there is the season that we're in right now, the fall. It's just being out there in the woods. There's this sense of a complete dissolution of sense of body, mind, breath, energy, nature, trees, everything just falls away. And there's just almost like the clarity in the air in the autumn becomes the clarity of the body, mind. I know that all sounds a little bit mystical, but that's the 4th body. When everything dissolves into a sense of oneness, that's the 4th.
That makes sense, and maybe greater than the sum of its parts in a way when you experience them all sort of synergistically.
That's well put. Yeah.
So that's the integration of the 3, sort of a fluid weaving between them.
Yeah, a fluid. Well, not even that. Like just a inseparability. Yeah, I think before that we're weaving between them. We're alternating. Earth, feeling the physical body, feeling our breath, feeling our energy, feeling awareness, sensing awareness. And then eventually those things are not separate at all. And that's a non-conceptual experience. When separation dissolves, there's a kind of an aha in that moment. And that's the 4th body.
I also love the book in that you have put a lot of time into studying the concepts and the theories and the teachings. So you have that groundedness in actual theory, as well as your personal practice.
Yeah, that's been very helpful as someone who's encountered the teachings on like Dharmakaya and Nirmanakaya and have felt a little bit lost. I think your book does a really nice job at really bringing that down to earth a little bit and, through your own sort of experiential insights and everything, kind of making it feel like much more accessible, in a sort of everyday kind of modern understanding of these ideas that can feel really distant and abstract at times.
And questions I've had that have long been unanswered, like, why is there the word mind in mindfulness? And how does it connect with remembering, smriti, sati? What is the exact connection here?
Yeah, that actually the word for mindfulness, smriti, means to remember. And there's no mind in that word at all in the Sanskrit. I think mindfulness is a good translation, because mindfulness, it means attention, means remembering to pay attention. But I think in some ways it may have triggered in us as meditators this notion that meditation is about mind and not about body. And so I think that's the problem with the word mindfulness. Someone's now written a book called Bodyfulness, which of course is a wonderful term that someone thought to bring that forward as a book title, to really center on that really what mindfulness is bodyfulness. And I think that's one way to capture it. Yeah. It's what happens. Things get lost in translation. When we translate from Sanskrit or from an Eastern language into a Western language, some things get lost in translation.
Totally. Those cultural meanings are like totally different. Mindfulness. Oh, mind. Oh, brain. Oh, thoughts. Oh, I'm not supposed to think. Oh, no. Like.
Exactly. Yeah. One of the biggest, I think the biggest misconception about meditation is that it's not thinking. It's about not thinking.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So maybe just one more quick question for our listeners who are enticed by our conversation about relating to the body here and being guided and learning from our embodied experience. Is there any kind of small little practice nugget that people might be able to have as a starting point?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Why don't we do a very short practice of grounding? And that's one of the most fundamental practices in this book. And it's very simple, it's very immediate, and it's very easy to do. So let's try that one. And the name of this practice is ground, finding ground. So we'll just begin by coming down from the thinking mind into the feeling body, bringing attention all the way down to the place where your body contacts the cushion, where your feet are in touch with the floor. Allow yourself to not just notice that feeling, but to actually saturate that grounded feeling with your attention. So that you are the ground, stable, solid, grounded. When the mind becomes distracted by sound or something in your environment, or is drawn away by a thought, allow the feeling of your body on the cushion or feet on the floor, the feeling to draw you back. And again, relax into groundedness. solid, stable, grounded.
Thank you, Willa. That's great. So this has been a lovely conversation. Thanks so much for all of your wisdom and insight you've shared with us today. And if our listeners are stimulated, they can certainly get your book and learn more on our website on our show notes page. But where else can they go to find you, study with you?
Most of my teachings and my teaching schedule can be found on the website of naturaldharmafellowship.org. And also we have these days hybrid retreats and online courses, as well as in-person events as well. Yeah, that would be a good place to go. And also the audios for the book can be found on Shambhala's website. Shambhala Publications has published these audios for free, and every meditation in the book is guided on those audios. So you're seeking support.
Great. Looking forward to digging into those. Lovely. Okay, Willa, thank you so much. It's been lovely talking.
Thanks so much. Love the book.
Thanks so much, Kate and Alex, for having me on. So great to be on with you too. Be well.
Thanks for listening today.
If you enjoyed this episode, we hope you'll hit subscribe, leave us a great rating or review, and spread the word. You can also go to noblemindpodcast.com to join our email list. You'll get a weekly behind-the-scenes message, news, announcements, and other special goodies we come up with just for you. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.